Right, looks like we are live. Welcome back to the third ever Brojo online. Should probably start saying ever now, makes it sound far too epic. Welcome back, and for those of you who've been sending through messages and support and your questions around what we talk about here, thank you for that. Please keep doing it. If there's any way that I can help you guys improve your lives, just send through questions, dan@brojo.co.nz. So welcome back to Brojo Online. For those of you who've never been here before, this is a version of something that I run here in Auckland, which I usually do live with people in bars and at my house as well. And it's essentially about people getting together to discuss various viewpoints on both social mastery, becoming socially adept, and confidence. What is confidence? How does the mind work? How do we manage our psychology to feel and be confident as often as possible? So my name's Dan Munro. I'm a confidence coach, at least that's what I've called myself, down here in New Zealand. And essentially, I come from a background of having not been confident, and been a people pleaser, approval seeking type guy, and having gone through my own journey over the last 5-7 years or so to undo that and become what I believe to be confident, or at least as close to that as I can hope to get. And more importantly, what I'm focused on is what it means to be authentic. What is the difference between the way you behave and the way you wish you behaved, and closing that gap as much as possible. So Brojo has teamed up with the Improvement Academy, theimprovementacademy.com, run by Sean Russell, supported by Arthur Cott, Johnny Cooper, and Sam Ryder, all fantastic guys. And this Brojo Online is about adding some key topics to the discussion that you're all focused on around confidence and around mastering your social world. And every week we're going to have a look at something new that I believe will contribute greatly to improving your satisfaction in life, particularly in the social world. Now these online chats are a little bit unruly compared to in person. So when you want to ask a question or say something, just comment in the chat box on the side there, and I can unmute you and we can talk, or I can just answer your question as it's typed, and you can come in and make comments, share your stories. That's what it's all about. When it comes to Brojo, what we're really focused on, like I said before, is authenticity. We're not looking at trying to make people like you. We're not looking at trying to get things from other people. What we're really focused on is you being able to go home every day, look yourself in the mirror with pride and say, I had integrity today. I was a man by my own standards, or a woman by my own standards today. And that's what we're always going to be focused on. This isn't like pickup and those other things where you learn how to manipulate other people into liking you. This is about polarizing people into loving or hating you by being honest. That's our whole theme. So that's the basics, and today we'll get into the new topics, one of my favorites, and that's a huge one that comes up all the time. I've titled it Creating Endless Conversations. And what I'm really talking about here is the ability to generate a natural, spontaneous conversation, even with a complete stranger, and not have to worry about what to say next. We're going to be looking into that today deeply. We're going to look into the psychology behind that anxiety and that worry that comes up during a conversation, and have a look at the difference between a natural, spontaneous, connected conversation versus a transactional, false, trying to get something conversation. That's what we're really focusing on today. So before we even start, we need to do some definitions. This is often how we start Brojo, as we look at what do the words mean. Let's look at them again. Why do we think that they mean what they mean, and what meaning do we attach to them? And the first sort of definition I'd like to look at is, what does it mean to have an authentic conversation? What does it mean to have a real connection through conversation? What does one of those interactions look like? So we're going to have a look at that first, and then we're going to have a look at why we can't seem to achieve this a lot of the time. So what does it mean to be authentic? This is always a really interesting one, because essentially you are always authentic. There's no such thing as inauthentic. Whatever you're being right now, it's exactly who you are. Excuse me. So there's really no such thing as being inauthentic. However, when we use the word authentic, that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is this kind of voice that's always there in the back of your mind telling you when you're off track. Sometimes it makes you feel guilty. Sometimes it makes you regret your past. Sometimes it admires other people for demonstrating the behavior you wish you saw in yourself. There are a lot of different ways that this voice speaks to you, and it's not always clearly heard. But when we say authenticity at Brojo, what we're talking about is the kind of behavior that that voice is asking you to engage in. The one that tells you that you're being a pussy when you don't go to talk to that person. The one that tells you that you should have stood up to yourself, to your boss. The one that tells you that you could have been kinder to that person if you weren't so wrapped up in your own ego. That voice that's telling you what it means to live by your values, your core values. So essentially, whenever I work with someone, I see that there's two people. There's a million personalities in your head. We won't go into that today. You know, you aren't just one person in there. You're just a range of different voices. But what I really see mostly is this kind of, there's two people. There is the person you wish you were, and you always know what that person is. And then there's a person you're actually being right now. And sometimes that behavior is the same. The person you wish you were is who you're being. And sometimes that behavior is very different. Now, when I say the person you wish you were, I do not mean the person your parents wish you were. I do not mean the person that society wishes you were, or that girl on the date wishes you were. I mean the one that you think about when no one else is around and there's no one else to please or seek approval or fight against. It's just you. That person that you admire the most. The one who seems to have the strength where you're weak. That person. That's what we mean by authenticity. And your behavior, how far away it is from being that person, is inauthenticity. So just to clarify, when I say authentic, yes, you are authentic. You're always authentic. Everything you do, even when you're lying and cheating and stealing, that's you being you. Right there in that moment. That's as you as you're ever going to be. But when I say authentic, I don't mean that. I mean being the guy or the girl that you really wish you were, the one you'd be proud of, the one where you would have no interest in swapping places with anyone else on the planet. You'd be so content with the way you were. So, how does this apply to a conversation? Well, essentially, when I talk about being that authentic person has things to say and things that they want to do. And when in an authentic conversation, that is the kind of thing you say and that is the kind of thing you do. So what we're looking for in an authentic conversation is an alignment. Often it's referred to as congruence. But I don't like that word because it often brings up connotations of manipulation, appearing to be congruent rather than authenticity. But essentially, let's take the example of being on a date. There's all these, it's a highly emotional situation often for most people. There's a lot invested in it working out and everyone gets all panicky. And you're sitting there and there's a voice inside your head saying what you really think, what you really feel, what you're really focused on. And then there's this kind of performance. There's this, what you think you should be saying, what you think is the best thing to say, what do you think is the right thing to do or the appropriate thing to do. And there's quite often a conflict between these two voices. You'll notice it. And on the day you're thinking, damn, she is looking fine. That's your authentic voice speaking. And then what comes out of your mouth is, so what do you do for work? And that's the inauthentic voice speaking. And that one's at the controls because that's the one that's actually coming out. So an authentic conversation is when that original voice, that authentic voice, is also the one who's speaking and the one who's listening. So the authentic one, when the other person's speaking, he listens, he waits to see what that person's going to say. The inauthentic person takes that time to try and plan their next thing to say. So if you're on a date and the other person's talking, you can see their mouth moving, but all you're thinking of is, what would be the best thing to say after this? You know, what should I say next? What would make you laugh, you know, or what would be interesting? Can't say that, that would be inappropriate. So what's something that's more appropriate? This whole time, you're not even listening to it. That's the inauthentic you having the conversation. So let's have a look at some of the key points that make the difference between these two people. So as we saw in that little example I was just giving, that inauthentic voice has this moderation process. It's constantly filtering, doubting, changing, adapting, constantly looking for a better way to say something, for a better thing to say in the first place. Whereas in an authentic conversation, you're spontaneous. You say things as they occur to you. You may take some time to get your thoughts together to make sure that what you say is accurate. We'll talk about that later on. But there's no moderating or filtering to try and make someone like you more. There's no trying to get anything. The only aim is to express yourself as honestly as possible. Whereas the inauthentic person, there's no spontaneity, it's all strategy. So these are two of the key things that we see in the difference between these interactions. Is it spontaneous or is it strategy? Are you trying to be honest and express yourself, or are you trying to get something? Because these different concepts cannot exist at the same time. You cannot be spontaneous if you're trying to be appropriate. You cannot be spontaneous if you have a strategy. And you cannot be authentic if you're trying to get something. It will always eventually come into conflict. If nothing else, this is the point I want you to really understand throughout this entire little chat, is that if you are using any form of strategy during a conversation, you're moving away from that authenticity. Any kind of strategy. If you're trying to get anything from the other person, if you're trying to walk away with any form of external based result, like their approval or even their disapproval, you're trying to get something from them, you're trying to create a reaction that you've pre-planned, then you've already lost your authenticity and you've lost your ability to connect deeply. So spontaneity, and the interesting thing is that's what we'll be talking about today, is the fear that the concept of spontaneity brings up. We are terrified of spontaneity because it requires us to have no plan, to go into the unknown and allow the unknown to take place without being prepared for it. We're going to talk about how to deal with that today. Genuine interest. So the difference between authentic and inauthentic is often displayed in how genuinely interested and engaged you are in the conversation, in the other person. If you're asking them questions and you don't care what the answers actually are, then that is not genuine interest. Whereas if somebody says three things and you go, wait, that thing stood out to me, forget the other things, I want to talk about that. That's genuine interest. Or even more so, they say three things and you don't find any of them interesting. You say, okay, well, what else? There's also the concept that it's not someone else's job to be interesting. It's your job to be interested. It's your job to pay attention, just as it is theirs. So if you're in an interaction and you're lost in your head trying to think of the right thing to say, you're not paying attention. You're not there with them. And ironically, this is the thing that's stopping you coming up with something good to say. You trying to think of something to say is your biggest barrier to thinking of something to say. We'll talk more about that in a minute. So genuine interest means instead of planning what you're going to say next, you fucking listen to them. You listen. You take in their words. You let them finish what they're going to say. You watch their body language. You absorb the entire message that you're receiving. And you don't have any plans of what you're going to do with it until you understand it, until it's finished, and then it's your turn again. We often use the word natural. Natural, I guess, is a way to describe spontaneous and genuine. It's what naturally occurs. And this is a key point, is anytime during a conversation, things are naturally occurring to you all the time. You've never actually had nothing to say, because even feeling like you have nothing to say is something to talk about. You can say, wow, right now my mind just went blank and I can't think of anything good to say. That's something to say. So natural means instead of trying to find something, you simply observe what is there. Again, we can see a link, which we've talked about in Brojo so many times, between confidence and consciousness. If you can get to the place of consciousness where you watch your mind and you watch them speak and you watch the whole interaction from a distance, instead of being you, you watch you having a conversation, then there's so much to talk about. So many interesting things going on. Two people interacting is fascinating if you're paying attention. The body language signals, the words, the things they're not saying, the things they're trying to say but they can't get out, the common awkwardness and nervousness or excitement and tension they feel. It's like a dramatic show. But if you're trying to think of what to say next, you miss the show, and therefore you've got nothing to talk about. It's like sleeping through a movie and then trying to talk about it afterwards. You can't, because you didn't see the movie. Whereas if you're paying attention during a conversation, there's plenty to observe and comment on. Connection. There's a big difference between having things in common and having a connection. Well, actually, it's not a big difference. That was an exaggeration. But so many of us go into, especially an interaction with a stranger, and we're desperate to find something in common. We've listened to them carefully, but only to think, God, what can I relate to? Come on, give me something that we've got in common. Please be into sports. Come on. Yes, you're into sports. Sweet. We can talk about soccer. Thank God. This is what happens so often, doesn't it? You meet someone at a party or at one of those awkward work events, and you talk to them and they're just a blank slate. You've never met them before. There's nothing about the way they dress or look that gives you any hint as to what they might be into. And so both of you just start awkwardly fishing for commonalities, you know? So, did you see the game? No? Do you drive a car? What do you do for a living? It's kind of like, come on, give me something I can work with. And the funny thing is, that is so far away from actually connecting with someone. Connection is about commonalities, but not in the way most people think. It's not about commonalities as in we're into the same stuff. We watch the same TV programs. We have the same job. These could be good signs that you are connected, but they're not really what we're looking for when it comes to commonality. When it comes to commonality, think about what do we have in common about the human experience? What do we have that we're commonly afraid of, excited by, passionate towards, confused by? These are things that we can have in common without needing the actual content to be in common. So somebody might be really into surfing, right? I've spoken to surfers before. Now, I can't surf, and I don't really want to learn how. I'm not really that interested in it. You know, I've got this kind of a mild fear of drowning, and that just doesn't seem like the right kind of sport for me. But one thing I can connect with a surfer on is the absolute presence that occurs to them when they're at the top of a wave. That moment of just being with the wave and nothing else. I get the exact same sensation, as far as I know, with dancing. And I've got my head resting against the girl's head and our bodies are moving at the exact same time. It's just me and her and nothing else. That's what I can connect with a surfer on, that feeling, that reason why we do it. But if I'm like surfing, damn it, I don't surf, and I move on, I've actually missed an opportunity to connect with them. So understanding the difference between commonality and connection is a huge part to creating an authentic, genuine conversation. Stop looking for having things in common externally and start connecting on the commonalities you have internally. How you view things, how you feel about things. Those things can be different, but how you view and feel is the same. And balanced investment. So This is, I think, one of the biggest barriers I see to people connecting properly, especially say in the dating scene, is one person does more work than the other, and the investment becomes imbalanced. So one person will be sharing more deeply or doing more talking. It's not always in quantity, by the way. Sometimes somebody can be doing more talking, but they're sharing less. Somebody could be taking bigger risks. Somebody could be leading when the other person isn't following. Somebody is drowning the other person in information without waiting. Somebody's paying more attention to the other person. Somebody cares more and is more interested than the other. This is one of the really, these kind of investment imbalances, they're poison to a connection. You know, it starts to feel unfair. One person will feel under pressure, like they're receiving too much, and the other person will feel under pressure because no matter how much they give, it doesn't seem to be working. You know, there's a lot of people I work with in our initial work, clients that I coach, is about what it actually means to be honest, because we all think of ourselves as honest, but once you investigate it, you find that very few of us are even close, you know. And we start working on honesty, and one of the first experiments they have to do is what I call a shame grid, where they go out and start revealing things they're ashamed of to people in order to become shameless. And what can often happen is this kind of overinvestment. They go out and share lots of stuff, and they don't demand that the other person does the same, and it becomes unbalanced. And then they come back, oh, I'm just creeping people out with my vulnerability. I'm trying to share and be raw and pure and honest, but people like, I'm getting this kind of overshare signal. I'm like, well, good. It's good that you're noticing that signal happen, because that signal is your sign that it's their turn to invest and that you should be demanding that investment. All of these things we're going to talk about in more detail throughout this session. We're going to talk about how to do all this stuff. But let's just review those key points about an authentic connection, an authentic interaction. Spontaneous versus strategy. It has to be, this is occurring in the moment, not something I've pre-planned. Genuine interest. You follow the path that draws you in, not trying to fake it. Okay, so you talk about what you want to talk about, you pay attention, rather than you paying attention to your inner mind, trying to come up with the right thing to say, which we describe as being natural, allowing this conversation to go where no conversation you've ever had gone before. Wait, it doesn't make sense. Sometimes I start a sentence and then I don't know where I was going with it. But the idea, that's the idea I wanted to get across, is that if you really embrace this authentic, endless conversation style that we're going to talk about, no conversation you have will be the same. You won't tell a story the same way you've told it before. There won't be routines and tactics and phases like there is in pickup. There's going to be no plan. It's going to be completely freestyle. Like both of you have a blank canvas, a paintbrush each, and you both just start drawing and see what happens. That's what a real natural conversation feels like. Also understanding there's not going to be a filter on what's right and wrong, what's good and bad, what's appropriate and inappropriate. All things will be viewed as equal in a natural conversation. One way to look at it is, what's the difference between a fake conversation and a conversation you have with your best friend? What we're looking to do is to create that scenario like you feel when you're with a best friend, that kind of comfortable, easy flowing, unplannedness of it all. We're going to try and bring that into all of your interactions, which ironically will make a lot of people feel like they're your best friend, which is a great way to connect. And which brings us to the other point, connection. So we're going to look at, instead of finding things in common, connecting as humans, finding the commonalities internally, the things that we share, all of us humans share, and speaking to those as often as we can, because that's the juicy conversation. That's the shit we really want to talk about. That's why so many people watch dramatic movies. We like to see the human life play out in front of us and connect with it in all its glory, all its ugliness and beauty. You know, it's not all fucking sunshine and smiles, is it? You have bad days, you have things go wrong, you have pain and suffering in your life. If that's not part of your conversations, then you're not being authentic. An authentic conversation will give time and energy towards those topics and towards those subjects because they're real. It's also what you're most likely to connect on. I made a little video that I'll send out to you guys about connecting on the dark side. Now, one of the most common ways that an inauthentic conversation plays out is that somebody only shows their light side, their what I call their smooth side. They show what's best about them, but that's not real. What's best about you is only half of you. Then there's the other half. An authentic conversation, like the kind of conversation you'd have with a best friend, will show both equally. It'll talk about the times you feel good, but it'll also talk about the times you don't. Talk about the times you did well and the times you failed. An authentic conversation would embrace all of those things and just view them from the observer point of view. And that final point of balanced investment. Once your turn's finished, it's their turn. Once their turn's finished, it's yours. And everybody needs to be putting equal money into the pot. If somebody's not stepping up and matching the other person, then they need to wait until that balance is achieved. So all of this sounds lovely, doesn't it? And then we get into a real conversation and we feel like it's impossible to do. So what we're going to talk about next is those barriers. Why do we feel these barriers to connection? We've already kind of touched on it, but the key thing is to think about what's the difference between when I talk to my best friend or a loved family member, somebody you just feel completely comfortable with, somebody that you've got no need to impress or anything. They've totally accepted you. You feel absolutely free of judgment in their presence. There's nothing to be achieved in a conversation with them. You do it for the sheer joy of doing it. What's the difference between that and any other conversation you have? The first one, let me just grab a sip here. Most common one that comes up with the guys that I work with is trying to get something. That's the biggest difference. It's what John Cooper talked about, acquisition. It's being in a conversation and having an end goal for that conversation in any way. It could be as simple as they laugh at my jokes, or it could be as complex as this is building towards us getting into a relationship together. Whatever it is, the idea that there is something that this conversation will contribute to, there is some aim and purpose to the conversation beyond simply connecting. So before you go into any interaction, first you need to address, why am I doing this? You need to get clear on why you're doing it, because if you don't get clear consciously, subconsciously, you will be clear and it will be different. So if I go on a date, for example, and I don't get clear in my mind before it, like, this is just to practice connecting, this is all about me being as honest as possible to see what will happen. If I don't do that before a date, my brain will choose something else. What I'll do is like, boom, maybe she could be your girlfriend. And automatically I'm starting to try and get something. Or maybe she could like you. That's something I'm trying to get as well. Approval. Attraction. Even thinking to get a connection as opposed to have a connection in that time. So getting a connection implies that you'll still be connected after the conversation. That's still trying to get something. Having a connection here and now with no attachment to it lasting beyond this conversation or even beyond the next words that I say, that's that real naturalness, if that's a word. It's easier said than done, but we will have a lot of practical steps near the end of this. So trying to get something, that's one of the biggest barriers to having an authentic conversation. It's one of the biggest difference between a conversation with someone you love and feel comfortable with versus someone new, is trying to get something. All your life, you've been taught that every conversation has a goal, that you should be trying to achieve something every time you interact with someone. And that achievement is something that you can measure externally, something that will last beyond the conversation often. Even if it's as simple as them liking you, that's something that we think of as going beyond the conversation. What we're really going to be talking about today is not looking beyond the conversation, not even looking beyond what's being said right now. I don't know exactly how to get this into your minds, but the concept I really want to sell today is the idea of the conversation only exists in the moment. Nothing else matters more than what they're saying right now, what you're saying right now. Everything else is a fiction. What came before it is in the past, it's done. What comes next is unpredictable, that's pointless as well. If you can get to a point where it's just here and now, and that's all that matters, there is no trying to get something later, then you can have a real connection. It's ironic, letting go of trying to get a connection is the best way to get a connection. Now, this leads to a lot of things. So the overall barrier to an authentic conversation is trying to get something. Even trying to be understood is trying to get something. But there's lots of different sort of sub-concepts below this and how this appears. For example, one of the main ones is the concept of trying to figure out the right thing to say, or the right time to say something. This idea of right, which really represents, I think, in meaning the word appropriate or helpful to my goals. This is the single greatest barrier to thinking of something to say. Like I mentioned earlier, trying to think of the right thing to say absolutely blocks your mind, puts you under so much pressure that you can't think of a thing. You've been having a million thoughts all day and suddenly you got nothing because you're trying to think of something. It's quite an ironic state of affairs. And I see it as you can watch a conversation, you watch someone listening to someone, and you can almost hear their mind going. You can almost hear their mind trying to think of that perfect thing to say, and totally away from the conversation. They're nowhere near the other person and what the other person is saying. They're just planning, strategizing, looking at options, discarding some, considering others, or they're just sitting there going, I need something to say, I need something to say, I need something to say, and nothing's coming to them. Figuring out the right thing to say is so detrimental because of what it represents. It represents trying to get something. If you're not trying to get something, there is no right or wrong. If you don't really have any attachment to this thing going well in some way, and you're happy for it to just go whatever way it goes, in fact, you just want to see what happens if you're honest, you'll see which way it goes, and any result is fine, then you won't need to have a right thing to say. There'll be no wrong thing to say in that situation. You worried that you'll say the wrong thing is what leads you to try and think of the right thing, which is what blanks your mind in the first place. This is a concept I'll bring up again and again and again in Brojo, and it'll take you a while to understand it, is in order to connect with someone, you must be willing to lose them forever, every single time you talk to them. It's the only way to establish a real, genuine connection, is be willing to lose them. Now, what's ironic is when you're in a conversation with your best friend, you're so sure that you're not going to lose them, that you actually behave in a way that you would if you were willing to lose them. So when you feel complete safety, you totally let down your guard, and then you become who you really are, that kind of authenticity. Ironically, if that was someone new, you'd be risking pushing them away. And that's the way that will bring you those connections. To simplify all this, because this is a topic that takes so much time to really register after all the social conditioning and programming we have to impress other people and to be liked. But if you can keep coming back to how would I behave if they were my best friend? What would I say right now? What would I do right now? If they were already my best friend, I felt completely non-judged and just comfortable to just be myself. What would I do and say right now? That kind of thinking can help you realize the difference, to realize where you're disconnecting. So figuring out the right thing to say, if you can let go of that, just pay attention and then see what naturally occurs to you, give you a long way towards a natural conversation and a real connection. Silence. Silence disturbs people, doesn't it, in general? It's something that comes up in Brojo a lot, is the term awkward silence. It's particularly relevant in the dating scene. This idea that somehow a conversation ends if there is no noise. Now I want you to think about the last time you're sitting next to your best friend and not speaking. Did the connection end? Were you not able to talk again after a long silence? Was the conversation over? Or was it merely a breath, a waiting, a peaceful silence? Embracing silence is a great way not only to build connection with others, to allow them to constantly digest what's happening and not feel rushed through, but also gives you plenty of time for things to naturally and spontaneously occur to you. And one of the ways that you can really practically implement this is when you're interacting with anyone, especially a new person, is wait until they've finished speaking and then wait some more. So you don't have to fill the noise, fill the space with noise. You can actually allow the space to be. That space between somebody else finishing talking and you beginning. In that space is where things to say will naturally occur to you. But if you don't let that space happen, then you have to think of what to say while they're still speaking, which means you stop paying attention. Which means by the time you think of something to say, whatever came after that from their mouth, you haven't heard. Which means you miss so many things, so much information that they've given you, and therefore miss so many opportunities to connect. A little trick that I use for this one is I run, when I'm in a conversation, especially when I'm coaching someone, I assume that the most important thing they have to say will come at the end. Because the way somebody's mind works, as they're talking, they start generating the idea that they're actually trying to get across. And so often they're interrupted before they get there because the person listening to them thinks, oh, I know what they're trying to say. And that's one of the big silence killers. It's like, okay, I know what they're trying to say now, so I don't have to let a silence happen. I got this next thing. As soon as they stop talking, I'm going for it. And the whole time the other person's still talking, and you're missing all of it. That you're like, fuck yeah, I got something to say. All right, got that story about that time I was in high school. Oh, she's going to love that one. Can't wait till she stops talking. I want to smash her with that story. Lunacy. So what you can do is while they're talking, all these things will pop into your head. Oh, that's like this time. Oh, you should say that. Maybe you shouldn't say that. Oh, I can't believe she said that. You can watch all this happen, then come back to listening to her and go, wait, she hasn't finished yet. Now what's she saying? She still hasn't finished. What is she saying? He hasn't finished. What's he saying? And wait till the very end. Now, some people won't be used to this and they'll just keep talking. They'll feel nervous that you're allowing them to finish. They're used to being interrupted. Shy people in particular will ramble on. What you can do is you can stop them. If you feel like they've made a point and you can't take on any more information, you need silence to process it. Wait. You can just say, wait, hang on a sec. Before you continue, let me just digest that point you just made. Hang on a sec. So you're saying, and so on. You can create those silent moments if the person's over-investing. But that's the thing, trying to avoid silence, trying to fill silence with noise means that you have to pre-plan before the silence occurs, which means you're not paying attention, which means you're missing out on them triggering you to actually come up with natural, spontaneous things to say. You're killing your own ability to think of something to say by thinking of something to say early because you're afraid of silence. One of the Brojo veterans, his name's Mitch. I think he's somewhere in the academy. I live with him as well. He did a great experiment with silence, where he met a girl for a date and he showed her a message on his phone or something. I can't remember how he did it exactly. But he said, look, I want to experiment with silence. Can we just be silent for the first 5 to 10 minutes? And at first she went along with it, but it was really awkward and weird, and they're kind of looking around going, oh my God, this first time we've ever met, But then something happened. They started looking into each other's eyes, the awkwardness faded away, and it became this very powerful experience, very intense experience. And after, I don't know, 7 minutes or something like that, Mitch felt it was a natural time to break the silence, and he asked how she felt about it, and she was blown away by it. She loved the experience, as did he. Silence is only weird for a little bit, and then it becomes something else. It's only while you think, I need to end the silence, that makes it uncomfortable. If you think, well, silence is fine, let's just digest each other for a second, let's just process what's been going on and catch up, You'll also get much less of that kind of buyer's remorse if you use more silence. So you might be, and you see this as one of the common laments in the pickup world, is that you'll be like, I had this great interaction with like 10 minutes, blah, 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 so much attraction, keynote, blah, blah, blah. And I got the phone number, now she won't text me back. Well, odds are, if I watch that conversation, there's no silence. There's no stopping to process and catch up and spontaneously come up with the next thing to say. There's just strategy. Move from one thing to the next, one thing to the next, never allowing that chance for the other person to leave, not being willing to lose them. And so what happens is they now have to walk away with a whole 10-minute conversation to process, rather than having like processed it regularly throughout. They're just kind of like, what the hell was that? You know? And then they doubt themselves. They're like, I am so confused about what just happened right now. Oh my God, now he's texting me. I don't trust myself here. That was weird. As opposed to like throughout the conversation, being genuinely checking and going, yeah, I do like this guy. I still like him. And having the silence to allow them the space to do that. And the last biggest barrier that I see to an authentic connection is trying to keep their attention. Now, these are all kind of in the same boat, these different barriers. They're trying to keep their attention, trying to be interesting, it's one of the reasons you'll fill a silence, is trying to make sure you don't lose their attention, trying to be funny, trying to look interested so that they be interested, and so on. All of these things have the same thing in common, trying to get something, or, as I like to put it, being unwilling to lose them. So, how do we actually apply something that allows for a natural, spontaneous conversation to occur, something that can go forever? Those dates that last for hours and you're just lost in each other, talking about one thing after the other, nothing makes any real sense, but you're so connected. What's that? What is that, and how does that happen? This is where we're going to talk about the 3X model. It's my foundation of my work, I guess. It's the template or the model that I use to try and describe what it means to be confident, to behave in a confident way, and to live by your values. What we're going to look at here is how this applies to having an authentic conversation. Now, I won't go into too much detail about the 3X model. There's some resources I can send you guys if you want to know more about it. Just email me, dan@brojo.co.nz, and I'll send you some stuff. But essentially, look at it as simply think, speak, and then wait. Thought, expression, then silence. This is 3 parts, and you constantly flow through them. Now, the other person is also following this, but they're at a slightly different time from you. So when you're silent, they're speaking. When they're silent, you're thinking. So as you revolve through this model, if you go thought, speak, silence, and they go thought, speak, silence at their own pace, you build a deep connection and you flow. Let's have a look at what happens at each of these 3 stages in authenticity. So as we talked about before, somebody who's trying to think of the right thing to say, they'll avoid that silence stage, the release phase of the 3X model. So they'll just go thought, speak, thought, speak. So while the other one's talking, they're thinking. And as soon as they finish talking, they speak. They kind of avoid the silence, don't lose their attention type thing. And then you got somebody who just, as soon as the other person finishes speaking, they react. There's no thinking. They just go react, react, react. They often can be quite judgmental or critical, or they miss the point. They don't really digest what's being said. They just say whatever occurs to them. That kind of shoot from the hip type person who actually is just really inappropriate socially a lot of the time, and that kind of thing. There's no real thought to it. And you got the person who just sits there panicking, nervously, silently, and that's a person who doesn't speak at all. So we're looking at somebody who actually has a good, consistent flow through all of these stages to allow them to be spontaneous and natural. So the first phase, that thinking phase, the value we're trying to live by there is curiosity. We're allowing our brain to show us what occurs to us. And the question that can help you with this phase would be something like, what is the most honest thing I could say right now? I want to keep this as simple and as practical as possible, so that if you were out, say, at a work event or on a date or something, and you're in a conversation with someone, and you want to use this model to be able to actually apply it. The first one, before you even start the conversation, is to ask yourself, you look at someone, they catch your attention for whatever reason, you ask yourself, what would be the most honest thing to say? How could I express that as honestly as possible? So you might be at this work event, you see someone that catch your eye, and you ask, what would be the most honest thing to say? Straight away you look at them like, why? Why did they catch my eye? Well, what did I notice about them? You say, well, looks confident, big smile on his face, and good suit. Okay, that's why I noticed him. I now know the first thing I need to say. So, of course, there's some courage involved. You go up to him and say, hey, man, I just noticed you because you got a big smile on your face, super confident. I really wanted to meet you. Then you wait. And this is how we keep that a balanced investment. You've just gone in, you've been vulnerable and raw, you've talked about something that's kind of close to your heart. Now, this is where a lot of nervous, shy people, once they're doing this, they'll start babbling and just overwhelming the person with too much information. But at this point, you're like, no, I've made my stand, I've said my piece, it's your turn now. Now, a lot of people will be hesitant to invest at this beginning stage when you're like this. And that's where questioning can come in. So they'll be like, you go up to the guy and say, oh, yeah, confident, such a big smile, I had to come meet you. And they say, thanks. And you say, yeah. And you just look, you just wait. And they'll say something like, so what's your name? So now they're starting to invest a little bit of interest, a little bit whatever, but they haven't matched you yet. They haven't told you what they noticed about you. They haven't really shown what you've shown. So you're going to wait even more. You say, my name's Dan. And you wait. You wait for them to catch up. And they might start getting a little bit panicky at this stage or something, and they might say something like, so yeah, looks like that's a cool suit you got going. They're like, okay, now they're investing. Thanks, man, I bought it, blah, 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 you know, and that's why I noticed you're one. I've got a bit of a thing for fashion myself. You give them a little bit more, and then you wait. The honesty part of this is really important. So when you do speak or when you do express yourself, it has to accurately align to what you were thinking. We talked about earlier on authenticity versus inauthenticity. For you to be authentic in an interaction, the words that come into your mouth, the body language, the tone, has to accurately reflect what's going on inside your mind. In order to help you do this, what I'd suggest is, rather than trying to finish the thought and give them this final product, show them the thought in process. And what I mean by that is, I could be, say, on a date, and I could say to someone, I'm nervous. That would be a finished thought. I've taken everything that's happened with me and I've categorized it and I've chunked it down and I've made it as easy to describe as possible. I'm just going, I'm nervous. That's one way of being honest. Another way would be to actually try and put some effort in to help them understand what's going on inside you. So rather than getting lazy and saying, I'm nervous, because it's a very lazy way to describe yourself, very inaccurate, I would say something like, you know, when you walked in, my heart started beating faster. You know, I've actually been thinking about this date for like the last 3 hours on and off, and then seeing you really kind of amped it up. That's so much more in terms of authenticity than saying I'm nervous. And it's much more honest. Nervous isn't a real thing, it's just a word. But the description of all those sensations and the process you've been through that afternoon, that's real. So when you think about what the most honest thing to say is, then you ask yourself, how can I really accurately express that? But that's as much thinking as you do. Any more than that and you're wasting time, you've already gone too far with thinking. As soon as you've got any form of answer to those questions, the only thing you've got left to do now is to try and express it. So let it come out. You don't need to get it right, perfect. It's just your best attempt with what you know at the time. So you might end up saying, I'm nervous. because you couldn't think of a better way to say it. That's fine. Start with that, and then wait for their reaction. If they go like, okay, and be like, okay, what does their reaction tell me? That they're nervous. Well, your reaction tells me that you're nervous as well. And then you just keep going, cycling through. So you simply allow thoughts to occur to you, you express those thoughts and feelings, and then you wait for them to have their turn. It's really that simple. And you wait for them to have their whole turn. So rather than like, okay, they said something that I can speak to, I'll wait for them to finish, and then I'm going to talk about that. You put it aside, you let it go, that great idea you had, that awesome story that you wanted to tell them. If they're still talking, you need to let that story go. Don't cling to it like your safety. You know, like, oh yes, I've got something to say next. This will get me through the next round. Thank you, God. Let go of it. Allow yourself to get to the end of what they're saying with nothing to say. Because you've always got something to say. Always. All you need is a little bit of silence. You just need to hear your mind speak. It's speaking all the time anyway. It's just that when you panic, you don't listen. So you're sitting there, they've finished saying something, just stop and let your brain have things occur to you. Now, if you are feeling nervous, your brain might start saying things like, oh no, you need to say something good. Say something good. What's a good thing to say? And you're sitting there going, shit, I better think of a good thing to say. Rather than stepping back and going, well, that's what my mind's telling me. Think of a good thing to say. Panic, panic, panic. That's what I could share. How can I share this? You know what? When you were talking, I became so attracted to you that my mind just started racing, and now I can't think of anything good to say. You can say that. It's a perfectly fine thing to say. And if they're a good fit for you, this person will react positively to you saying something like that. Which really brings us to the kind of point of all of this. Why would I put myself in such an unknown situation, allow myself to end up saying things that I think right now are stupid to say, like, I've got nothing to say. It sounds like a dumb thing to say. Because for you to really be willing to lose someone, you need to be willing to lose them. I can't emphasize this enough. You have to be willing for them, no matter how well it's been going, it could be going well for like 30 minutes. But at any point in time in that conversation, as soon as you realize that the two of you are a bad fit, you're willing for them to walk away forever and never see them again in your life. If you can bring that to a conversation, you'll be so much more relaxed. You're willing to lose someone. I see a lot of the guys at Brojo talk about, they'll go out and they'll start a conversation because they're trying to be honest, but then the conversation starts going well, and all of a sudden they're scared of losing the person. So, oh no, now she likes me. Shit, better say something good. And they go off track and then they lose the girl. But if they were to keep with the original intention of just being honest, because that's why it's working well, and keep being willing to lose her, even though it's going well, then it actually has the best chance of going well. So ironic. If you can go into a conversation and be like, I am just here to practice honesty. I'm here to practice listening and speaking and thinking. I'm here to practice silence. That's all. If you're still here after I've practiced these things, great. I'd love to see you again. If you leave during my practice, that's fine. It just shows that we're not a good fit. If you can really bring this into your conversations, you'll realize you always had something to say. You've never had a problem socializing, really. You've always got something to say. It might not come out beautifully. It might not have the finesse, as we say in Brojo. And a lot of guys listen to me speak, especially in like public speaking, and they go, yeah, but when I'm honest, it doesn't sound like you, Dan. So, well, I'm not a master speaker. I've just had thousands of hours of practicing trying to be honest. That's why I'm kind of good at it now. That's why it sounds good when I do it. You will too, but first you got to sound ugly. First you got to be awkward and weird and all of that while you try to figure out what it means to connect honestly. And every time you feel that you are being creepy or weird, it's because you were trying to get something. Guaranteed. The problem was not what you were sharing. It was the reason why you were sharing it. So if you can get to the point where you really are just practicing integrity, it's like, I don't care what happens in this interaction as long as I have integrity, as long as I'm honest as much as I possibly can throughout the whole thing. As long as I live by compassion, where I really pay attention to them instead of trying to think of the right thing to say, I'll do my very best, which is the best I can do right now. There'll still be mistakes and I'll still get it wrong a lot of the time as I learn this stuff. But I'm willing to lose them so that I can practice this properly. If you can get there, you're going to have fantastic connections and you're never going to run out of something to say. Your mind is making noise all the time. You've always got something to say. So go out there and practice this. You can practice this first with people you feel safe. If you practice it with people you feel safe, you don't have the added burden of feeling uncomfortable or worrying about being judged. And then you can go out there and allow yourself to be judged, allow people to be polarized away from you, allow people to hate you, if that's the case, in order to practice what it's like to have an authentic conversation. Because waiting in your future, you can keep practicing this, is a time where suddenly you meet a stranger and you're the same with them as you are with your best friend from the very beginning. I was talking to an old friend of mine yesterday. Her and I have been friends since I was about 13. She's like a sister to me. And I have another best friend, if you call it that, who I've known for about the same amount of time. And when I was this nice guy people pleaser, those were the only two people who I wasn't like that with. They're the only people that I was really open and honest and just free to be myself and absolutely did not worry about being judged or anything like that. I could say whatever I felt with them. And I used to think it was because I trusted them and felt safe that I was able to do that. I now know it's the opposite. It was because I was doing that, I ended up feeling safe and trusted. So understand that building a connection doesn't wait until you think, oh, they're not going to judge me. That feeling comes because you're open and honest. Let them judge you, and eventually you will find the ones who don't. And those are the ones you'll connect with deeply. So I hope this was helpful for you. I wouldn't have recommended it if it hasn't worked for me and hundreds of other people that I've coached. I want you to go out there, let go of keeping people, and just allow yourself to speak your mind after the silence. And I'll see you guys next time.